Around 24 hours in, I realized my build had problems. I was too squishy, my damage was too low, and after I did my first red map, things just weren't cutting it. So I needed to make a change. I needed to make some improvements before I could farm red maps comfortably. Now, about 24 hours after that, my build's at a much more comfortable place for red maps, and is rapidly approaching the point where even tier 16s become comfortable. So how did I go from red maps are a struggle to red maps are no big deal? For the most part, it was just farming Alch and Go with essences. I did do a little bit of harvest. I killed a few metamorphs. I, of course, did a couple of lakes that I had. And there were a few expeditions in there, including one low-level logbook. However, a majority of the money that I made was from harvest rather than any of the other sources. I honestly haven't been too scientific here, but let's say it's at the very minimum 60-40, if not 70-30 in favor of essence. The reason I like essence is, as long as you're able to do essences in tier 1 maps comfortably, you can do essences. And at first, that's exactly what I did. When my build was struggling, I got out a tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 map. And I just started running them in sequence. I put essence on all of them, and I kept going until my build started to struggle, which happened to be around tier 8. At tier 8, I found that my 4-link Dendrobate just wasn't giving me enough damage, especially not considering I hadn't fully leveled my poisonous concoction. I also found that if I didn't hit an enemy, I was running out of mana, and the Thief's Torment I was wearing was greatly limiting my survivability. So now I kind of knew what the problem was. I needed more damage, I needed better defenses, and I needed mana sustain. I also knew that I could comfortably farm tier 6 and 7 maps. Technically speaking, there wasn't a specific reason why I didn't just do tier 1, save for the fact that by tier 6 and 7 there are a few slightly better rewards. So that's what I was doing for a while in my farming. I put together a quick laundry list of what I needed. 5-link Dendrobate. Instead of buying a completely new Dendrobate, my plan was just link for what I had, so I'd probably need about 150 fusings. Or in my case about 43 because I made bad decisions, gambled, and it paid off. I also realized that to get rid of a Thief's Torment and solve my mana problems, along with adding some defensive auras, I would need a Devouring Diadem. This was about 200 chaos, so I set about doing essences with the goal of making 200 chaos. The method to my madness was fairly simple. I'd alch a map, wouldn't pay too much attention as long as there wasn't no regen on it. I'd put it in, put essences on, and then toss on a master mission if I had it, but if I didn't, no big deal. In terms of essences, what I was looking for is any of the essences that sold for 2 or 3 chaos each for a Screaming. Normally, you're probably used to corrupting Envy, Misery, Dread, or Scorn. But remnants of corruption are surprisingly common, so I'd also corrupt Loathing, Greed, Hatred, Anger, and Wrath. Since all of these essences, if they jumped up to Screaming, would be worth 2 or 3 C each, and if it jumped up to Deafening, they could be 10 C each. After doing this for a couple hours, I put my essences up for sale and waited for people to message me. And oh boy did people message me very quickly. I ended up with 4 essences of horror, which sold for about 40 chaos. I think I got around 70 C for the greeds, and most of the rest made up that 200 C. In the meantime, I'd also picked up some fusings, and I made the poor decision to try to gamble them and 5-link my chess piece. Luckily for me, that gamble paid off. So I now had a Devouring Diadem and a Dendrobate that was 5-linked. My defenses were better, my damage was better, and now tier 8, 9, and even 10 maps were super comfortable. I did some more reds, they weren't too bad, I even did some 14s and 15s. I'd die occasionally, but as long as I was paying attention to the mods, not clicking stupid altars, and not running into a Chaos Weaver 8 Essence monster, it wasn't so bad. Probably not fast enough to farm that I'd actually want to primarily do that yet, but good enough that I could definitely complete them if I needed for Atlas progression. And next up, I do want to talk a little bit about some of my Atlas choices. Before I do though, a quick reminder that if you're finding this video helpful, maybe you found a strategy to make some early league money for yourself, then go ahead and give it a like, then share it with a friend who might want to know the same information. For more content, get subscribed as I release videos almost daily. Or for something not directly related to Path of Exile, get subscribed to my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, where later today I'm going to be covering the recent gaming news, including of course the release of Lake of Kalandra and much more. A special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. But more about how you can help support the channel and contribute to videos just like this one at the end. For now, let's get back into talking Atlas strategy. I knew early on that I wanted to rush the essence nodes. The reason I wanted to rush essences is they don't actually scale with your maps, so they're just as valuable in a tier 1 map as a tier 16 map. This means I don't have to do tier 16 maps to get good value from my essences. This is something that I think people often overlook. They try to do essences in the highest tier map they're able to clear, and the mobs are just way too tanky and it feels time inefficient. Remember, even if you get twice or triple the loot of a map, if that map takes 10 minutes, and a tier 1 map would take 2 minutes, you're actually going to make more currency an hour by doing the tier 1 map. Especially for something like essences that add so much value to your maps without scaling as the difficulty goes up. They get significantly harder, but not significantly more rewarding. Of course, essences aren't the only thing I've invested in. I haven't quite decided the shape that my final tree is going to be, but I'm thinking that I want to do essences, harvest, expedition, and metamorph. The reason is I'm looking at what got buffed or what's still good. Harvest got a rework, so that one's a little bit up in the air, but I do want to give it a shot and see how things pan out. I like crafting a lot, and having a new crafting bench to play with is always fun. Whether it'll be worth it or not, I'm not entirely sure yet. However, Harvest is something that does seem to scale with your map tier, so I suggest investing into it more towards red maps rather than early on. Similarly, while Expedition is very good early, you generally want to be level 90 as soon as possible to actually get most of the good rewards. So I was pretty comfortable putting my early points into Essence and putting later ones into Expedition. And then finally, why Metamorph? First off, because there's no league mechanic that's pumping out a bunch of Metamorph rewards. And second of all, with the changes to rare monsters, I strongly suspect that also applies to Metamorphs as they're super rare monsters. Yes, technically they have unique classification, but they do inherit Arch-Nemesis mods, which means they should also inherit the modifiers that those Arch-Nemesis mods grant. I could be completely wrong about this, and it won't be too hard for me to respec my Atlas passives if I am, but I'm also going to be grabbing that. From there, I'll probably grab one master mission, either going for the Immortal Syndicate, Jund to get more such as Jund to get Devouring Diadems, or invest into Alva to print temples. Either one's profitable and can both be done with very little effort. My goal from here is to keep upgrading my gear. I don't think I need anything too spectacular to start getting Voidstones and start pushing my Atlas into tier 16s. In fact, I fought the Black Star and it honestly wasn't too bad of a fight. I was still wearing the Thief's Torment, but I believe I did have the 5-link at that point. From here, my next big goal is, of course, a 6-link. A 6-link will solve a lot of my damage problems, especially if I can find an inexpensive Watcher's Eye with mods that correlate to one of the auras I'm running. From there, I want to start rounding out my defenses, as I do feel a little bit squishy. Adding Grace due to the Diadem definitely helped with that, but against bosses that's not going to be a surefire thing. So I want to get something like a little bit of max res on a shield, as that really should help out. And if I shift around a few points, I can probably start fitting in a cluster jewel, which means I'll have to buy a 3-notable cluster, and that'll add a good bit of expense as well, in exchange for adding a large sum of damage. But because more of my damage will be on my tree, and of course in my 6-link, I can focus on defenses for the rest of my gear. This means things like swapping to an armor base for my gloves, and hopefully getting my armor to around 40 or 50,000. Because I'm a Pathfinder, I also have pretty much permanent flasks, so another investment in the near future is to get flasks with increased effect and reduced duration. I should still have enough duration for them to be up 100% of the time, and that'll be a nice bump to my armor, evasion, or whatever else I plan to use the flask for. Finally, speaking of defenses, right now I'm using an amethyst flask, and I could easily swap that for something else. A sulfur flask if I wanted damage, basalt if I wanted more armor, quartz if I wanted to cap my suppression that way, or maybe just the elemental flasks and not worry about max res at all. I don't have to worry if I'm using them for res cap, since they'll always be up the entire time. And of course, increased flask effect would not only increase the resists, but increase the suffixes, things like reduced curse effect, so I could become pseudo-curse immune, or of course increased armor and evasion. Either way, I've got lots of options here, and I'll probably be rearranging my flasks in the near future to prepare for bosses in tier 16 maps. But for now, I only have one question. Did you find this kind of video helpful? I've talked about how I've geared characters in the past, and I've talked about moneymaking in the past, but I've never really combined the two, and I've never done it this early on. Usually, I'll talk about things around week 1 rather than around day 3. So if you found this helpful, or maybe you want to follow along my gearing journey, be sure to check my profile down below, and let me know what you want to hear more about down in the comments below. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. Your support helps keep me independent and allows me to turn down things like sketchy mobile game sponsorships. You can do so for as low as $1 a month over on Patreon. Or, if you want to support me completely for free, then you can join the community by hopping into my Discord, link below. If you want more content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts. It's a place that I use to review games, ramble my way through video essays, and a lot more. Or of course, you can just click the suggested video in the card right now. I hope you learned something today, and maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.